first of all, thank you again for doing this. I think the last time I spoke with you, you were just kind of days from coming off the Gotham ensemble, and so many things have happened in just like, what is it, 2 months or something since then.
That's crazy.
How would you characterize the last year since last Sundance for you, if you had to sort of...
Well, you know, originally it was just traveling around with the film to different film festivals, which I was happy to do. I just mentioned that one of the proudest moments of that film was last year at Sundance when the lights came up at the end of the film, and just feeling like, wow, I'm really part of something special. It's just my kind of movie. And so I was happy to kind of travel around with it to several festivals, and then journalists began writing about the film and about Jennifer's work and Deborah's work and my own and other cast members, and it just has kind of taken on a life of its own, as you said, beginning with the Gotham Awards and the cast winning the Ensemble Award and the film being recognized for the Best Feature. It just kind of hasn't stopped.
Wow. I guess what I hope I can do, it's sort of like a mini Inside the Actor Studio, but just curious, did you go to the movies as a kid?
Yes, I did.
And were there any sort of favorites or influences for you, films or actors or anything that...
Well, you know, the first experience I think was a drive-in theater, probably in pajamas. As a little kid, I think we saw, I can't remember what Barbra Streisand movie my mother took us to. I think it was What's Up, Doc? That is a Barbra Streisand movie. And then the movie theaters, we would be dropped off as kids. It was a time when that was okay and wasn't thought of as child endangerment. It was a small town and you could drop your kid off and there would be, I'm not going to sound old, but there'd be a short and then there would be a film. So it would be like a Ma and Pa Kettle short, and then there would be a Don Knotts movie a lot of times, and The Incredible Mr. Limpet and The Reluctant Astronaut. I think those are some of the first times when I would see an actor and really liked seeing him. Don Knotts was very funny. And later on, began to see Andy Field reruns.
Right.
But I never even thought of that. But Don Knotts may be my first real
influence.
reference for acting.
When I've been doing a lot of reading about you today, and I've heard it was sort of interesting how you, in a way, stumbled into acting, and I just wonder, when did you, if you could tell about how you first dabbled in it, and then when you first, if there was a moment or a turning point or something, when you first knew that this is actually really what I am meant to do.
Yeah, there were a few things. I mean, my joke was that I was a child star in my family, because I grew up in a small town, and I was, I think, a pretty shy kid, but when there was family strife or difficulty, I think that humor always seemed to be the approach I would bring to either getting out of trouble or getting someone else out of trouble, or making someone feel better who didn't feel good at the time. I was a wrestler, really, and that was its own kind of theater in a strange way. It's two people. It was, in my little town, that was by default what I ended up doing. I grew up near the wrestling coach's son, out in the middle of nowhere, and he was my size and age, so I started learning holds and moves when I was a kid, and by the time I was in high school, I kind of peaked and I wasn't that great at it anymore, and a new coach had come and I was looking for something to do. And I had a teacher who told all of his students that they should be in the play, and he took me aside specifically, said, "You're an unusual combination of extroverted on some days, shy on others. This might be something you might like." That was Scott Fodness, and I think it was Mr. Fodness' way of saying, you might be screwed up enough to do this, perhaps. And I recall the year before, when I was a sophomore, I'd taken a drama class because my sister Lori was in the drama class as just a slough class. People took it because it was easy, I think, and I just wanted to be in a class with her because I liked her a lot. It was my only chance. I'm a sophomore, she's a senior, and said, "I'll be in drama class with you, Lori," so I snuck in. But we went on a class trip to the Guthrie Theater, and that was a huge eye-opener. Saw the play The Crucible by Arthur Miller, and felt something that day that I'd never felt. I'd never really seen a play. Like I said, I grew up with one channel on TV. I knew that I was moved by maybe films I'd seen on television, things like that somewhat, but I've never felt anything like this. I thought, I wonder if I could make people feel that way. And then a year later, when I quit wrestling, and I had the Mr. Fonda said, you should audition for this play. I did. Had a tiny part in the play. It didn't matter. It felt like I was home. So those kind of events, I think, got me going, and I never really was sure how one would become a professional actor. But it gave me maybe a feeling of wanting to do something different, and maybe to kind of avoid the straight world in a strange way. And I fought against that for several years. I went to a year of college. I tried to kind of find normal, gainful employment, but it never agreed with me. I was never that great at it. And slowly, over time, was part of a theater company in Texas where I'd moved in Austin. Played in bands. It's a long, rambling.
No, I love it, and I actually
about a journey, but that's how I got here.
And who was just not to. I know we've sort of moved beyond this part already, but Tamara McClintock, was that somebody that was?
She was the first director. She and Scott Butler both were, and she was only at that school 2 years, my junior and senior year. And I had one dear friend that I'd grown up with wrestling, actually, and he and I went to the 1 year of college together. We were very tight pals, Tim Latier and Tim. I was going to go to Texas with my brother. He came with, and he still lives there with his wife and son Henry, but he still performs, and we were in a theater company together, bands, all kinds of things, and also hitchhiked thousands of miles too with that guy. So it's a great way to learn to act as well.
I was going to say, I heard that that was sort of an early opportunity to do acting. Maybe if you care to add to that, and also the fact that how you ended up from having spent the first chunk of your life in the middle of the country, how the decision was arrived at you had to pick a coast basically if you were to make it work. I've heard that was
certainly. I don't know if you were asking about hitchhiking, but I'll start with that it was a way of, and I did it alone, on one particularly long, brutal leg in the middle of winter from west of Denver, the Continental Divide, back to Minnesota, which is a tough haul in February, alone. But it was good, but you end up in the middle of a snowstorm, and you are freezing, and you finally get a ride, and if that person turns out to have a worldview very different from your own, I'd gotten enough rides where I learned that arguing with the driver about politics wasn't a good idea. And particularly when it would snow, you'd have to convince them you were like them. And it often didn't feel good to do, but I was kind of playing a character in order to for a gain, for personal gain, which was to get further down the road to where I needed to be. And then I'm trying to think of what you wanted to.
Well, just how, in terms of coast, I read that Brad Davis was also, so I don't know where you guys crossed paths along the way, but that was somebody that said the coasts were.
Yeah, wow, you've done your research for sure. My life's flashing before my eyes. It's nice, but actually on that film, Rosalie Goes Shopping, Brad Davis played my father, a wonderful actor, and Alex Winter played my brother, who Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure had come out with Lost Boys had. He was a guy who was, had worked on Broadway growing up, Alex had. So between the two of them, it kind of pissed in my ear about, already at that point I'd worked with several movie stars where I had very small parts in Texas, and they'd say, "What are you doing here?" I'd say, "I'm an actor, why would I?" They said, "Well, you should be in New York or LA." I would say, "Look around you. You want to move here?" I bet, "Yeah." And I kind of do want to move here. The movie star would stand and say, "Why would I leave this place?" And I would say, "Well, because your opportunities are limited here." And over time, I began to realize that that maybe there was a way for me to make a living. So when I worked with Brad Davis and Alex Winter, and they both said, you should take a run at it. Brad was married to Susan Bluestein, who was a casting director, and so he said, "My wife will introduce you around a little bit." And Alex introduced me to his agent. No one really wanted to sign me, and certainly most of the people that Susan Bluestein introduced me to weren't interested. I didn't really have any experience. I had a demo reel from a few movies in Texas, but I was just pretty green. I'd done some theater professional level, touring around the country as well, but finally there was, we lost John Lights.
That's what you were taking.
Yeah, finally there was, an agency who did sign me, and a woman named Nancy Green Keys, who was extraordinarily helpful early on. Just, that kind of got me to LA and got me going.
I thought one of the really nice things that I read was you were talking about how there's so many great actors in the middle of the country that haven't, they maybe don't make that move, so we never know about them.
Yeah. A lot of them have families, and they're not interested in the glitz and glamour. Believe me, I understand.
Sure. One of the things that was just mentioned when you were out getting your virtuoso interview before the award that you're here to get tonight, and in almost every interview that you read, is people mention the term character actor. And I've interviewed other people who have often been called character actors, and I get the sense, most like you, or maybe it doesn't bother you, or it's too polite to, you're too polite to acknowledge, but I would think it's kind of annoying to have somebody constantly categorize you in that way, because what is it's inherently what an actor is, character actor. But I just wonder, having had to address this so many times, what to you is a character actor, and do you embrace that, or is there a better way to categorize or to sort of define the unique skill set that you bring versus maybe a guy who is primarily there because he's a pretty boy or so. I hate to put it, but that's the way that, I guess, in a way, when people say character actor, that's supposedly the inverse of that, right?
Yeah.
So I just want to put it to you, what is it actually, how do you feel about the term, and what does it mean to you?
Sure. I think for some reason early on I thought it was a disparaging term, but long ago it lost any negativity at all. I guess because a lot of my favorite actors and actresses are who can disappear into characters. That's what I emulate and try to do. I think that unless an actor plays themselves over and over and over, that they're a character actor. I guess there are actors who sort of just do the same thing a lot. That's probably not easy either. I think a lot of times the characters, the villains, are often better written to begin with, and it makes it more interesting to portray, rather than kind of standing there looking tough or looking handsome without anything to really do. I think that we're all play characters, even people who aren't actors. I think every time, this interview, you're probably a different person than you would be if you were home, watching TV and talking to a friend or something. I think that everybody portrays characters every moment of their life, and you act different with different people, and you act different around a cop than you would around, your buddy or whatever. So we all have it in us to switch gears and be something a little different, and character actors hopefully do that well.
Just another key thing that I guess also people have asked you a lot about, particularly recently, is the fact that people are, I don't know what the exact definition of a virtuoso is, but this kind of award, I think, is meant to imply sort of a breakthrough year. But you have been at this for a long time, and not at low level. I mean, very prominent movies, great performances in substantive roles in TV and film and theater and everything. And yet, in some ways, you're being discovered by a lot of people, or maybe they're only recognizing that they've known about you, but they're really appreciating it now. So I wonder what that's been like for you, and then afterwards I want to just see if I can connect some of the most important dots leading to Winter's Bone. But just, is it weird to have this now at this stage, to have people acting like you've just shown up when you've been at it for so long?
It is a little odd, I guess, but it's kind of like, I don't know, I just like to be in stories, and so I kind of just do this, and then if people notice, that's really great, and again, hopefully that opens doors to more wonderful experiences in life as an actor. It's kind of surreal, but I'm just trying to, kind of embrace it, and sort of, it's hard to put words to. I know it makes my family proud, and that makes me happy too.
Yeah.
Family and friends.
What was the first movie role where people really in some ways, you know, that you got excited and people really took notice. I was looking over, and in some ways it seemed like maybe From Dusk Till Dawn, would that be one of them?
Maybe, you know, that movie with not many people saw, but with Alex Winter and Brad Davis and Marianne Zekerbrecht, who's the lead German actress. That one, Rosalie Goes Shopping, I think I got like a tiny mention in the New York Times as, you know, didn't suck or something, you know, wasn't awful. You know, those kind of things, it's strange to look back at, but there's a moment where you kind of feel like, you know, maybe I did all right there, and maybe this is something I can do. I mean, I'll be doing this hopefully as long as I live, and under many different, hopefully varying and interesting circumstances, being an actor. But as much as you kind of, really coming out of a theater company that was kind of underground, as much as you kind of look down on any kind of major press saying you're doing okay, it was encouraging, I should admit. And you know, that was before I even left Texas, before I moved to Los Angeles, but probably Dusk Till Dawn was something that people noticed, but again, it's never really been like an overwhelming amount of this guy's, you know, incredible or incredibly deserving.
Right.
But that was fine, because I mean, just know why to do it. So.
Just hope I can mention two other, just out of obviously a lot of them, but just ones that stood out when, I guess, in hindsight, and I'm just curious what your take. I guess, you know, Perfect Storm, obviously, you mentioned earlier, that was a big movie, big showcase. What was your experience with that one? For, you know, because I think a lot of people maybe will now go back and revisit these, and they see people who they maybe didn't fully notice or appreciate before, and I think they will. So I'm just curious for you what that one meant.
Well, that was a wonderful, you know, actress Rusty Schwimmer that I did a lot of the work with. We were put together a screen test, and the casting directors, Janet Hurst and Jane Jenkins, gave us each other's numbers, so we went to a bar in Hollywood and tried to say all our lines without having anyone around us know that we were rehearsing for a screen test, and then we ended up screen testing and both getting cast, which is a pretty rare thing. That's an interesting memory. Wolfgang Peterson, you know, I loved the film Dust Book so much. I had a lot of excitement to work with him, and just the whole cast was terrific. Vic Merribuck, Bill Finger, Mark Wahlberg, George Clooney, Diane Lane, all really interesting, wonderful people. John C. Reilly. It felt, and shot a lot, you know, on the studio lot, which was something that I hadn't done that much of. You know, spent months driving on to the lot. I felt like I was part of the club, which is kind of nice. That movie, as hard as it was to make, unlike I think every other actor on the film, the day that it wrapped, I felt like I just wanted to start over and do the whole thing all over again. It was a good feeling.
And then obviously jumping along, you know, we're all over the place here with chronology, but with Me and You and Everyone We Know, which totally different scale, different everything, but that one, because it was so instrumental in leading to Winter's Bone, I just want to particularly, and because it was such interesting, if you can talk about that one.
Yeah, I remember reading the script and being really, really moved by it. I was doing Deadwood at the time, and schedule-wise it didn't look like it was going to work out, and I was pretty despondent because I knew they were interested in me for the part, and I just loved the script. It reminded me of a theater company in Austin, just the vibe of it and things like that. People I worked with there, some wonderful directors and actors in Austin, and it felt different from the Hollywood kind of fare that I was mainly reading and being part of. I think we're being attacked. Some sort of person emptying garbage, but they had to do their job too. Yeah, and it ended up working out, where I was able to do Deadwood and did a film with Jeff Bridges that ended up coming here called, what ended up being called The Amateurs, and you remember, you know, over a two-week period, and then back into Deadwood, so it all worked out.
And how did Me and You and Everyone We Know, what what has Deborah Granick said about that's what did she see in you in that made her say, here's a guy for Teardrop?
I have no idea. I think again there was a vulnerability, I think she said, and that was something that I really kind of but really had wonderful, healthy conversations with Deborah. They were such amazing phone conversations leading up to doing the part, where I was trying to really bury all that, you know. I felt like Teardrop needed to be, in order to, if this, I consider myself a person who helps tell stories. If the story is a young woman's perilous journey, then my job, I felt, in that story was to make that journey more difficult, you know, and to not play the ending. If I end up being an ally at the end, I should seem like a foe in the last possible moment, so that the audience has something to experience. I felt that was Teardrop's real role, was to be seen a seeming obstacle, when the beauty of his character was that he wasn't at all. But that was our perception. Certainly when I read the script the first time, that's what jumped to me was, wow, this guy doesn't really change, but my perception of him does. That was interesting and attractive.
And my understanding was that there was, at one point, a lot more dialogue, and then it was pared down, monologues and stuff.
Yes. Deborah Granick wanted a lot of silence and space, to her credit. She let me do a lot of those monologues that, probably knowing that she was going to chop them up, but I'd learned them, and I wanted to say them, and in a weird way, all that stays in there, even when it's cut on some weird level. I think it's still a piece of the film.
I read that you did all kinds of other just preparation, you know, from obviously the book itself, but other books about the area and the people. But one thing that I specifically wanted to ask you about was you apparently for all of your movies, I know for this one, you have what is blood nerve mean?
Well, I don't always do it, but if it makes sense, I do. I try to sometimes distill the script down to 1 or 2 words, just because it just helps remind me of what it's about if I get lost or whatever. Deborah liked that, you know, blood, literal blood spilled in the film, and the blood of relatives, which blood in that part of the country is huge. You know, relations, family is a big deal. And then nerve, just like the idea of a raw nerve, of the nerve of that young woman, of the nerve of me going to rescue her, the nerve of breaking windows and fighting against the odds. And I don't know, it just seemed to make sense. It doesn't even make much sense to me.
No, it's interesting, but if it worked, it worked. But 2 main other things I wanted to ask you were jumping back to TV, which is actually, I think you're saying you prefer to Deadwood. I think a lot of people maybe that's how most people know you sort of most recently. You've also, if all my information is correct, you had done some of the more neat things like the live episode of ER and the X-Files, which were just really prominent. I just wonder, for you, is TV or film, obviously, what do you see as the primary differences for you in terms of, and do you prefer one over the other? Is there something?
Yeah, I think that there's very little difference unless it's network TV, which has constrictions about bodies and language and things like that aren't always really great for storytelling. But if it's the kind of television that doesn't have constrictions and commercial interference, interruption, there seems no difference between that and a movie to me. It's just exactly the same. It's either a good story and good people, or it's not.
And the other thing for jumping back was just I neglected to ask you how Deborah initially reached out to you, or how you came to actually be in the part, which is.
Yeah, again, I think she'd seen that movie and offered the role of Teardrop. It seemed like an offer. It was one of those things where I couldn't exactly tell what was happening. We spoke on the phone a couple of times. I remember it was coming up on Christmas. I guess we shot in February, March 2 years ago, so it had been a couple of Christmases ago, right before that. And I remember getting ready to get out of town, and I was talking to her maybe for the second or third time, and I remember it's strange to even think of, but I was kind of wondering whether or not I should do the part, and then after talking to her, I got super into the idea of doing the part, and the last call I remember before leaving for Christmas was, well, I want to do the role if it's still, if it is, and if I felt like I was in such a weird position, kind of asking if the part was an offer at that point. I think that it definitely is, but you just never know.
Right.
People, and then there's money, people who want to hire maybe someone else and that kind of thing. And she said, no, it's definitely happening if you want to do the part. I was relieved, and we just kept talking, and then a couple more months passed, and I was there shooting. And
the very last question is this: just you've talked often about this dilemma where sort of having some degree of anonymity, or where at least where people can't quite place you, benefits you as an actor. On the other hand, it can also benefit you as an actor to have more opportunities, which can come with being recognized. So how are you now at such a fluid point in your life and career where so much is going on, where things I imagine maybe you're changing? I don't know if you've noticed the differences yet in terms of opportunities for roles or different things, but just how are you facing that question moving forward?
I think that's the really, it's a real challenge and a really interesting dilemma, as you say. You work really hard. You want as many people as you can to see the work you do if you're a creative person. And then suddenly it can feel like a detriment when people know too much about you. I know for myself, there's very few movie stars that I can really believe playing a character. A lot of wonderful actors that I know too much about without even wanting to know about them, and it becomes difficult for me to believe them. If a movie star comes on screen as a janitor, I may say, wow, that movie star is doing a pretty convincing job pretending to be a janitor, and hopefully when I walk on screen they go, there's a janitor, and just watch the story. It makes me nervous. It's a difficult thing. As you said, it can open doors and things. I'm trying to pick a path that's honors the work I'm trying to do, and honors the film Winter's Bone, to try to do as much as I can to publicize the film without yanking all the mystery out of me as a person. Talking about personal things, talking about your past,
right.
Talking about how you work, all those are I understand why people are reclusive sometimes, but on the other hand, I'm glad people are interested and flattered. It's just a really thin line, and I'm trying to find a way to walk that thin line without falling over the edge.
Well, congratulations. I'm sure you'll figure it out. Thank you so
Yeah,
much
sure.
for really appreciate it.
I appreciate it.